But let's bring on my co-host for today's show. She is a Democratic strategist, a political commentator. There is much, much to talk about today with her. Amisha Cross. Amisha, how you feeling?
Well, I have been better. That whole SCOTUS leak, and I know we'll talk a little bit about it today, has left me and I think women across this country up in arms.
Yeah, Amisha, we spoke about this yesterday with Aisha Mills, but I wanted to talk with you because we've had some really passionate conversations on these airwaves about a woman's right to choose, about women's health, and also I just think the right to privacy, because folks forget that Roe v. Wade was about the right to privacy. It wasn't about your religion. It wasn't about your thoughts or what you think or what you don't think. It was the right to privacy. A lot of folks forget that. So I want to just get your thoughts just off the bat of what you think of what happened and what this means for women who don't have a lot of money, women who can't afford to take a first-class ticket to New York City for their health. Just give me your thoughts.
Well, first off, I'm thankful that whomever the leaker happened to be, whom I consider a whistleblower to a certain extent, actually did it, because it lights some fire under a lot of Democrats and a lot of advocacy groups around what we already knew was likely to happen with the current composition of the Supreme Court being as strong conservative leaning as it happens to be. But we also have to remember that this is a federal issue, and it has been a federal issue for quite some time. We pushed through and seen a lot of states that have been adversarial towards women's reproductive rights. Over 400 bills were passed to restrict women's reproductive rights during the Obama administration across multiple southern states. With that being said, I think that right now, looking at Roe v. Wade, possibly within the next few weeks not being law of the land anymore, that sends shockwaves across America, particularly for women. I don't care whether you're in a red state or a blue state. It should send shockwaves because it diminishes a woman's access to safe abortions. Be ye not confused. Roe v. Wade, upending Roe v. Wade will not end abortion. What it will do is end safe abortions. Women who have unwanted pregnancies have found ways to get rid of those pregnancies, to stop those pregnancies for decades, and did so for decades long before Roe v. Wade was even in action. But what ended up happening was they were dying in alleys. They were dying in basements of random people's homes who considered themselves doctors. They were dying themselves from taking medications to try to end their pregnancies, throwing themselves downstairs. My mom was a rape victim. She ended up slitting her wrist. She threw herself down the stairs. She took medication to end a pregnancy herself. I think that we have to be very real about what's being faced here. Incest victims, abuse victims, victims who quite frankly don't have the wherewithal financially or the social emotional supports to actually, carry children to term. Also, those women who have fundamental health problems, who actually want to have their babies. I have several friends who've had to go through the abortion process, including a cousin of mine, not because she wanted to abort, but because she ended up in utero having issues with being able to sustain her child. And I think that we have to be very serious about that, because if she had not had that abortion process, not only would she have lost the baby, she would have died as well. So the process here that frustrates me is that there are single-minded individuals who are very serious about either, saying that this is a religious issue, which it never really has been, but also arguing that they have the right to tell you what to do with your own body. And as a woman who respects autonomy, a woman's decision when to have kids, if she wants to have kids, how many kids she has, that resides within that woman. It does not reside within our court system. It does not reside within our legislative process. It does not reside within our politics or our policy. And I think that that's where it belongs. The decision on expanding your family, not expanding your family, having a family, that is a decision that is very personal and one that needs to be kept at that level.
I want to shout out Attorney General of New York, Tish James. She spoke at a rally with a crowd of protesters, rather, and admitted that over 20 years ago, she had an abortion. Just want to play this clip. I thought it was really powerful. Listen to this.
As a former city council member many moons ago, I came to this issue in a very personal way. I was in this place. I was just elected, and I was faced with the decision whether to have an abortion or not. And I chose to have an abortion. I walked proudly into Planned Parenthood. And I make no apologies to anyone. one. To no one.
I make no apologies to anyone, to no one. I think that's really powerful because some people have an abortion. Obviously, you know, it's traumatizing and it's tough, but the guilt they want to put on you. I think it's so heinous to call women who get abortions murderers. I just think that is so. Let me give you an example. Although we weren't alive then, when I look back on it, I think it's so heinous to call soldiers in Vietnam baby killers. That was the slang for soldiers in Vietnam, baby killers. That was terrible, and this is terrible. And to call women murderers, how soulless do you have to be? How soulless do you have to be to use such ridiculous, stupid language? And 9 times out of 10, I'm hearing a man say it.
Yeah, it's heart-wrenching because at the end of the day, I think that they're using that as a shaming process in the same way that in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, you saw them standing outside of abortion clinics or, you know, providers with baby dolls covered in you know, red things that were supposed to emulate blood stains, and they were handing you Bible pamphlets and all types of other things and chaining themselves to various fixtures within that area. I think that what they're trying to do is shame women for making choices for themselves. With that being said, I respect Tish James and respected her long before this, but I think that for most women, and the majority of women that I know, women in general will have had an abortion in their lifetimes. Statistically, we know that that's the case. Whether or not they shout it from the rooftops or even tell their best friends, parents, or anybody else, that is a personal decision for them. With all of that being said, I think that we have to stop acting as though there's only one type of woman who has an abortion or seeks to terminate a pregnancy. What we do know is that the majority of women who terminate pregnancies already have children at home. Most of those women are women who have a degree or some level of college. And with that being said, I think that, you know, even though the abortion restrictions are going to affect poor people and people of color the most in terms of not being able to travel to areas where access will be, we still have to look at the fact that women of all demographics and women of all backgrounds utilize this service. And they utilize it for various reasons, be it whether it's health, be it whether it is social emotional issues, be it whether they are abuse victims, and they should not have to give America a reason.
That's right.
You don't owe that to anyone. As someone, and I revealed this on one of our previous shows, who has also had an abortion, I too agree with Tish James. I don't regret it. I didn't have major traumatic experience. What we found is that, you know, polling wise, most women are more relieved. They would have had a greater traumatic experience if they were forced to keep a pregnancy that they were not ready for. One, carry an abuser's child, carry a rapist child, carry a child when they knew that they were not financially secure enough. Meanwhile, having the same Republican Party that doesn't want you to have abortions, but also doesn't want you to have birth control, but also wants to not fund programs like WIC that help to feed children from no income backgrounds, that also wants to cut funding to housing and HUD, that also wants to cut funding to food stamps, that also doesn't care about universal pre-K or childcare. These are the same people who are telling women that they need to have all of these children, irrespective to their personal circumstance, or even whether they want to do it. So I think that we have to talk about this in the context of what the Republican Party is trying to do. And this is not about religion. Again, let's level set here. This is not about religion.
Yeah.
A lot of religious people who go to church every Sunday and twice on the Wednesdays, are also also individuals who will seek abortion services. With that being said, the issue here is one of bodily autonomy, and it's one of a Republican Party trying to control women. Because you know what happened with with more access to birth control, with more access to abortion services, with more access to family planning? Women started going to college more. Women started graduating more. Women started challenging men in the workforce because now they had access to positions they didn't have before. What the Republican Party is trying to do is set women back, set their progress back, and rewind the clock, because they have a high level of comfortability with women being barefoot and pregnant and not being able to make economic decisions on their own. That's what this is.
And I want people to understand that, as I was saying in the beginning, it's about abortion, obviously, but it's also about the right to privacy. And overturning Roe v. Wade it could go far beyond abortion. It could have a deleterious effect on our rights to privacy across the board when it comes to medical care. And, you know, when men and their dick gets involved, suddenly they're going to care. Seriously, when it comes to medical care, when it comes to contraception, that your right to privacy would be at risk. Roe v. Wade is really about the right to privacy. And I thought that Republicans didn't want people in their, you know, small government, it's basically a mind your
Republicans only
business
want
law.
the right to your own body when it comes to wearing masks. When it comes to being
Right.
anti-maskers, they're all about my body, my choice, whether or not they get to wear a mask and, you know, spread all of their COVID germs to everybody else. But when it comes to one of the most invasive processes, the process of something growing inside of you,
Right.
they tend to not. They tend to want to fully take ownership of that. And it's a problem, again, because of all the things I previously stated about how they don't want to support children once they're actually here, once that child is delivered. You know, the whole pro-life movement is pro-pregnancy, is not pro-birth. It is not pro-K to 12. It is not pro the lifespan of this child as they're growing up and everything that they may incur. So it's very problematic to me that this is the hill that they've chosen, that they are going to stake their claim to. But to your point, Clay, they've been doing this now for decades. This is not a new move. And Donald J. Trump being able to have 3 Supreme Court picks during his one term in office really set this in motion at the federal level when it comes to the Supreme Court, leaning towards erasing Roe v. Wade in the respects that we know it.
Well, Amisha, you know, Hillary Clinton tried to warn us. She said this is the most important election of our lifetime. I do think it was, but they didn't like her. She wasn't friendly enough. They couldn't have a beer with her.
Consequences.
Yeah,
this is one of them.
They couldn't have a beer with her. Florida Rep. Matt Gaetz tweeted this out. How many of the women rallying against overturning Roe are overeducated, underloved millennials who sadly return from protests to a lonely microwave dinner with their cats and no Bumble matches?
This is alleged child sex trafficking Matt Gaetz, who was transferring payments for teenage sex on Venmo. So the last thing he needs to do is be in this conversation in general. And again, many of the women who have abortions are in relationships. Several of them are actually married and already have children. His whole ideology behind this is not supported by statistics or research at all.
I mean, this is a Florida rep. Lonely microwave dinners with their cats and no Bumble matches.
This is a guy who isn't even looking on Bumble for matches because he's looking at people's teenage daughters. So again, we need to be very careful and take with a very short-handled spoon what we accept from Matt Gaetz.
You know, I read an article yesterday about Tina Turner, that she got an abortion in 1968 because she was pregnant again by Ike Turner, who at the same time had somebody else pregnant. And she was being severely abused. She was a grown woman. There were no medical issues, but she wanted to end the pregnancy because she didn't want to have his child. They were married, but he had somebody else. 1968. And also, how are you upset about this draft opinion being leaked and you want to do an investigation, but you didn't want to investigate the January 6th insurrection? You don't want to investigate Virginia Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, who was at the Stop the Steal rally, who was texting the White House chief of staff, who is the wife of a Supreme Court justice, the only one who wanted to keep the January 6th documents sealed? I mean, you're more an insurrection. You didn't want to have a commission on that.
I mean, we also have to remember that Tommy Loren, famous, right-wing punditry, whatever, does Fox News, Fox Nation, got on yesterday basically saying that abortion activists were going to descend upon DC and have an insurrection of their own, because now for Republicans, just holding a sign outside of the Capitol means insurrection. it's frustrating because you're absolutely correct. There are several things that Republicans have done that have led to, January 6th will probably be the most aggressive, but they have done that require some level of investigation. Jenny Thomas, it was a news story for all of about 2 days, and then it completely disappeared. We have to do better. And I think that, the Republican Party right now are doing exactly what they meant to do. They wanted to see Roe v. Wade demolished. They wanted to push those actions in the states, which they have successfully done in several southern states and a handful of Midwestern ones as well. And now with the Republican court leaning in the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of the United States, it looks like Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned very quickly. Again, I want to make this clear to our listening audience. That does not mean abortions will be outlawed in America. What it does mean is that in states that have already been extremely aggressive towards abortion access, those states will eradicate it, and that will be backed up by the federal, by a Supreme Court decision. So those individuals in Mississippi, Louisiana, Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, several places across the South, and again, a handful of Midwestern states will have to travel to other states where abortion access is more readily available. That means flight costs, that means whatever cost of recovery, that means that many people, quite frankly, on top of the cost of the abortion care itself, are not going to be able to afford to travel to another state to have it done. You know what that doesn't mean that they won't end their pregnancies. That means that they will find a chop shop in Mississippi or in Louisiana or in Alabama and risk their own lives in the process. Because what this does is eradicate safe abortions. It does not eradicate abortions. Women have been terminating pregnancies for generations, and this will not stop them from doing it. What it will do is ensure that a lot more women will die.
Let's go to, where are we? Let's go to John from Indiana, first time caller.
I agree with the young lady, but for one thing, we constantly blame the Congress and the president, but yet, when in the last election, right, when my girl, we lost people in the Congress, and Nancy Pelosi did all she could the first time. I'm just saying, we the people, we are at fault. Because we know that the Senate is still owned by the Republicans because you got two districts there.
Yep.
And unless we, the people who are, I'm talking about the Democrats, unless we get off our rumps and go out there and vote, things are going to even get worse. Let's stop blaming people for something that we control. We must give the Democrats in the House and the Senate the ammunition. If you ain't got no ammunition, you can't do nothing. And they don't have no ammunition.
No, it's true, John. And I would be more outraged with the Democrats if they had more power or actual power. I saw somebody saying online, President Biden can do an executive order to stop Roe v. Wade from being overturned. No, he can't.
No, he can't.
That's not how this works.
These are people who don't understand, basic government. That's not how this works.
That's not how it works, boo. I'm sorry. Y'all got to vote. But I know y'all tired of hearing that. I'm tired of saying it. But if you're outraged, I just hope that you're voting. I hope that you're voting. It's heartbreaking that in states that have a huge Black population, for example, in Alabama or Mississippi, that we can't get somebody who has our best interest at heart, but we have to vote. And it just appears people, I want the outrage to translate into voting at high numbers. But midterms, we're scratching around 50% turnout. 50%. And all those kooks and crazies you see online talking about Jim Carrey is really Biden and whatever, and they're doing weird videos about Biden sucks. They're voting.
They're voting, they're coming
ready.
out in large number, they're organizing their families, their communities, and they're voting based on and bringing people together based on things that are non-issues like CRT, things that are non-issues. There's a boogeyman that they're deciding to run out here to scare suburban white women. When they say suburban women, they mean white women, and to drive them to the polls in large number. And it's working, whether it's fear of their kids learning about, oh my God, why the civil rights movement had to happen, or why Reconstruction was so damaging, or why there are now Black kids in their schools, and they don't want that. So I think that the more this nation tries to lean towards equity, the stronger the push by the Republican Party to take us back. We saw that movement with with the death of George Floyd. And we saw the resonance around that. And the minute that it fell out of the news cycle, the Republican Party decided that now was the time to push go on their racism and their white supremacy at a higher octave. That is happening on a daily basis, and it's happening up and through the midterms. So if people of color, if Black people, if young people, if Latinos do not decide to get out, LGBT people, if you do not decide to show up in November, I get it, it's not a sexy presidential election, but guess what?
Right.
It's going to elect your senators. It's going to elect our next Congress, your House of Representatives. It's going to elect your state's attorneys. It's going to elect judges across this country. It is going to elect positions that change your daily life. And many of those are long-range positions. It is not going to be an easy shoot. And if you make it that easy for Republicans to come in and take over at the state level, to take over at Congress and both the House and the Senate, you're going to regret these decisions. Because even if women's reproductive rights isn't your issue, a lot of things on this ballot are, whether it's housing prices,
Absolutely.
whether it's economic development in your community, whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's education, all of these things are on the ballot. Health, make sure that you show up.